So were there any family members or any friends that also helped you with your decision to join?
There were a couple other guys in Civil Air Patrol when I was in Civil Air Patrol as a teenager that also went in the Army, became warrant officer helicopter pilots like myself from the Chicago area that I knew, and we've kept in touch over the years as well. As far as anybody influencing me in my family, pretty much I'm the only guy in my family that was in the military other than my brother-in-law, who was an enlisted guy in the Army for a career for 20 years. I would say that he was influential on me making a decision to join the Army and be a helicopter pilot because he has been a career in the Army himself. So if I had questions or if I was interested in finding out more information about something, before I went in, I could always call him and pretty much ask him what his opinion was or what his thoughts were on a particular subject. And he was very encouraging to me. He wound up being a sergeant major in the Army and spent 21 years in the Army and was kind of a mentor, I would say, to me while I was growing up.
So how many missions do you think you flew?
More than missions in the Army, the Air Force kind of kept track of every mission, every sortie.
Okay.
And the Army, we kept track of time, and I have about 600 hours of combat time in Vietnam in the helicopter. I flew UH-1s, which were pretty much a troop carrier. It would carry cargo and equipment, and it would stay airborne a couple hours, 2.5 hours on a tank of gas. Had a crew of 4, and it could carry up to 14 armed troops, or 6 litters if you were using it as a medevac helicopter, or it could transport quite a bit of cargo.
So you were flying more of the helicopters that provided aid instead of piercing attack or anything like that?
Yeah, I was not an attack helicopter pilot. They had guys that had specialties in armed helicopters that were gunships, but that was not the primary focus of what I did.
Okay. So when you were bringing these soldiers in and dropping off supplies, were you literally like right on the combat zone, or the what's it called, where the two armies are face each other right on the battlefield, or were you a little bit further behind usually?
I did both.
Okay.
So sometimes I was primarily landing in a secure area, and other times you would take fire going into a landing zone to drop off people or equipment. And I worked a lot with the 2nd Signal Battalion. And back then we didn't have satellites like we do now, where you can bounce a cell phone call off of a satellite. So communications was very important for the commanders of the fighting troops on the ground. And the unit that I worked for, the 2nd Signal Battalion, was responsible for communications over a large area of the country, which meant that we had to take and hold, the infantry had to take and hold hilltops, because the best communication on a radio is from the highest point around. So we would bring men and supplies onto a hilltop after we'd captured the hilltop from the enemy and try and hold that in order to facilitate good communications with the commanders and their troops on the ground.
Did you fly a lot of night missions, or was it mostly day?
I would say probably 75% day and 25% night.
Was there a big difference for you flying? Like, were you more on edge at night, though, when you did fly night missions?
I wouldn't call it more an edge. You were more aware, and it was more difficult to fly either at night or in bad weather. So you were just maybe a little bit more cautious in what you were doing either at night or in bad weather. And of course, now we have global positioning. I mean, you can even do it in your car. Back then it was just looking at a map. It was time, distance, heading, adjusting for the winds, and often long periods of time, an hour or 2 hours low level. During the day you were very low level right on the treetops, going 100 miles an hour, 120 miles an hour. So navigation when you're that low to the ground is a lot more difficult than if you were up looking at the terrain from a couple thousand feet. So you had to study the maps and really kind of figure out where you were and where you were going and keep track of that. Much more manual than it is today. It's pretty automatic today. But back then, 41 years ago, it wasn't like that.
So, in your specific helicopter, did you have a team of men that was always with you on that, or did people get rotated out?
They pretty much rotated. People came into the unit at different times and left at different times. And before you could be an aircraft commander, a captain in charge of the helicopter, you served an apprenticeship as a co-pilot. You still got to fly every other leg, but it was more of an orientation for usually 3 or 4 months before they gave you your own command, your own helicopter. And then you would often fly with different door gunners or different mechanics. They would rotate around from in the unit as well. It was not a hard crew, the same people you were flying with every day. It would rotate around.
Okay. How big were these helicopters?
If I remember correctly, I think the Huey weighed about 9,000 pounds, so about 2.5 times what a car would weigh. And like I mentioned before, it would carry 14 armed troops and all their gear, or 6 litters if you were using it in a medevac configuration, along with a couple medics, maybe a nurse or a doctor.
So were these dual rotor helicopters or just single?
Mine was a single rotor, single large rotor on top with an anti-torque rotor in the back. The bigger helicopters were the Chinooks that carried up to 40 troops at one time. Yeah, and then of course we had the gunships, which were both Hueys, and we had a gunship that was fairly new at that time called a Cobra, and it had a pilot and a co-pilot, front and back. It was tandem seating.
Okay.
So you had the captain was in the back and controlled the rockets and the minigun, and the co-pilot in the front could control the minigun and grenade launcher and those types of weapons. So each had their own weapon stores that they could fire from their positions.
Okay. So your commanding officers, per se, did you have any issues with commanding officers when you went in?
Had really good commanding officers for the most part, both in the Army during the war and Vietnam, and later on in the Air Force. The leadership I thought was exceptional.
Okay. Did you ever, once question an order they gave, or ever have one of those thoughts in your mind, like,
No.
well, I probably shouldn't really be doing this, or?
No reason to question. These people had good insight, good knowledge for the time, and arranged missions very well. Yeah, I think all in all they were very professional and very well versed for the time.
That's cool. So, in your specific helicopter battalion, did they launch multiple helicopters at a time with you, or did you usually fly solo missions?
Primarily, about 90% of them were solo missions.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the ones that weren't solo missions, were those more towards the front line, or were the solo missions the ones that were more at the front line?
It was a mix.
Okay,
You know,
it was
if you
just all
needed to
mixed.
put a lot of people and a lot of equipment in one area at one time during the day, then you would fly in formation. If you were just doing resupply missions to an already established communication site, then it was mostly single ship.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you got home, was there somebody that you specifically wanted to see first, or somebody that you actually saw first, or were there people waiting for you?
Not necessarily. I mean, my family. I missed my family in Chicago, so.
No sweetheart or anything?
No, I wasn't dating. I wasn't dating one woman back then when I left. I was glad to be home, see my friends, and catch up with what they had been doing. And for the most part, I found them very uninterested in what I had been doing.
Oh. Did that disappoint you at all?
No, I wasn't disappointed. I realized most of them went to college, in most cases because their parents wanted them to. And one of the reasons, of course, their parents wanted them to do that is so that they would not be drafted and be involved in the war. And I can understand that. I had made a decision to participate and to join the military. And I was happy with my decision, and they apparently were happy with theirs.
Did anyone, before you left, did anyone try to convince you not to go, or try to...
No, not really, because the group of friends that I was hanging around with in Civil Air Patrol pretty much were patriotic American teenagers like myself. So really nobody tried to talk me out of it or try to convince me to reconsider and do something else. And I was pretty convinced that that's really what I wanted to do. And as it turned out, I think I made the right decision. If I was to go back and do it again, I guess the best way to put that is, would you do it again, looking back 40 years ago? And the answer is yes.
Okay. Did you feel like after you went and got and came back, did you feel like you got left out of something? Did you ever feel like you were missing something that anybody else had?
No, not in my particular situation. I enjoyed the flying, and then when I came home after 30 days of leave after the war, I was lucky enough to go to Europe and fly all over Europe out of Germany, and that was a great experience. Met some great people in my unit over there, had good leadership, and for the most part enjoyed my European tour.
So are you still involved with CAP?
I'm not actually. I'm still in touch with a lot of the guys and girls that I was in Civil Air Patrol with back in Chicago. We're close friends after 50 years. And but for the most part, I'm not involved in Civil Air Patrol anymore.
Okay.
Did when you came back, did like your town or society as a whole, were you ridiculed, or did anyone really know? Or?
I wasn't. No, I didn't experience any of that. But I mean, I wasn't home very much. I mean, between Vietnam and Germany, about 30 days, and it was just good to see my friends and good to be home with my family. And then off to Europe for my tour over there, which was good. I didn't find anybody that knew that I'd been in Vietnam that ridiculed me or tried to put me down. You know, I was aware of it happening to other veterans, but I didn't experience any of that myself.
What does it take to get the Army Good Conduct Medal?
Just staying out of trouble for a period of time. So that wasn't a hard one to get. If you kept your nose clean in the Army, then they awarded that to you after a certain number of months.
Okay. What about the National Defense Service Medal?
That's a medal that everybody in the military gets,
Okay.
just for being in the military.
Yeah, I don't know a lot
The
about
order,
these medals.
the order of significance of those awards on my resume that I've given you is in order of priority. The highest medal would have been the Meritorious Service Medal.
Okay.
The next highest medal would have been the Air Medal, 5 awards. And then working down from there, that would be the significance of those medals and ribbons.
So then what was the Meritorious Service Medal?
That was one for several projects that I worked when I was in the Air Force. I was a test pilot in the C-5 Galaxy in the Air Force, and I worked some special projects concerning the C-5 and its modification. And I was the operations officer of the squadron involved in that project, and it was quite a high visibility project at the time. And because we finished it under the allotted time and under the allotted budget, that's what I got. That's what I earned that award for.
Okay. Did you ever work with anything that was classified, or any specific missions that you were told not to tell anybody?
I did in the Air Force, but not in the Army.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have any more questions.
Okay. Thank you for your time. This is
You're very
wonderful.
welcome. Do we need to
Yeah.
mention the date? That's December 13th, 2010. I think that should probably be on there.
Oh yeah, we were gonna we can put that in as an edit.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I've enjoyed meeting you and enjoyed chatting with you, and I hope this helps you out in your project.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.